Her billionaire fiancé and his family mocked her late mother at a luxury dinner in the clouds, so she slid off his grandmother's ring, exposed their secrets, and called off the wedding in front of everyone without a second thought. Hi, my beautiful family, on this blessed day. May the Lord stretch forth his mighty hand upon you, filling your homes with peace that passes understanding, your hearts with courage that cannot be bought, and your children with dignity that no wealth can steal. May every daughter know her worth cannot be measured in diamonds. May every mother's sacrifice be honored, not forgotten. And may his angels guard you from those who mistake kindness for weakness. Amen. I ask one special gift from your hearts today. If this story moves you, if you believe a mother's name deserves defense, write in the comments, "Justice for Susan." Let those words rise like incense, a testimony that dignity matters more than dollars. Your words will be my treasure, and together we will keep this truth alive. In the glittering towers of San Francisco's tech district, the most dangerous power isn't coded in algorithms. It's hidden in last names and buried in shell companies. Brittany Bennett adjusted her deliberately modest blazer as she stepped into the steel and glass lobby of Roland Tower, her worn portfolio clutched against her chest like a shield. The PhD in behavioral economics from Stanford? Hidden. The seven-figure net worth carefully distributed across anonymous LLCs? Invisible. 6 months of preparation had led to this moment, the beginning of the most expensive test of character in Silicon Valley history. You're here for the UX designer position? The receptionist's voice carried that particular San Francisco blend of tech bro casualness and venture capital condescension, the kind reserved for those who didn't carry the right accelerator pedigree. Yes, ma'am, Brittany Bennett. She let her voice catch slightly, watching how quickly the woman's attention drifted back to her MacBook. The kind of dismissal Brittany had studied for years, first from her mother's side, now from wealth's opposite shore. Through floor-to-ceiling windows, the Bay Bridge stretched like a promise across sapphire water. This building, with its pretentious innovation pods and algorithmic art installations, represented everything her mother, Susan, had fought against before a landlord's greed and a system's cruelty stopped her heart forever. But Brittany wasn't here for revenge. Revenge was loud and temporary. She was here for something far more permanent: transformation. Mr. Rowland will see you now. The announcement came after precisely 43 minutes. A power play as predictable as disrupted rent control. Benjamin Rowland's corner office occupied more square footage than the apartment where Susan had died, decorated with minimalist luxury that screamed ethical wealth. His Stanford rowing medals lined floating walnut shelves. A Kehinde Wiley print dominated the wall behind his standing desk, not because he understood the artist's commentary on power, but because his interior designer insisted it projected conscious leadership. Please, sit. Benjamin gestured to a low-slung Eames chair, positioned deliberately below his eye level, a psychological dominance technique as ancient as patriarchy itself. At 34, he possessed that effortless charisma that came from never questioning whether doors would open. They always had. They always would. Not because he'd earned it, but because his last name had purchased the hinges. Tell me about your journey, Brittany. He leaned forward with practiced empathy, already categorizing her into familiar types: projects he could mentor, underdog stories that would elevate his TED Talk, diverse hires that would polish his LinkedIn profile. Brittany had spent 6 months studying his psychology through investor calls, podcast interviews, even his college ex-girlfriend's Substack essays. Benjamin Rowland was a man who had never built anything with his own hands, but inherited an empire constructed on other families' displacement. He dated women he could discover because equals threatened his carefully curated identity as Silicon Valley's most enlightened heir. Well, I went to San Jose State for design, she began, letting her hands fidget with her resume. A masterfully crafted document that told just enough truth to pass background checks while hiding the impact fund she controlled and the shell companies she'd used to quietly purchase minority stakes in half the businesses he frequented. I've been freelancing for small startups, but I've always dreamed of working somewhere that actually matters, somewhere that changes lives. The slight breathlessness in her voice. The way her eyes widened at his bookshelf of performative anti-capitalism manifestos. Every gesture calculated to trigger his savior complex like a perfectly timed API call. Benjamin Rowland was about to fall in love with a woman who didn't exist, and Brittany would document every moment of his moral collapse. Because this wasn't about winning his heart. It was about testing whether he had one at all. But to understand why a woman would orchestrate her own engagement just to watch it burn, you need to go back. Back to a cramped apartment in the Mission. Back to a woman named Susan who taught fifth grade by day and fought slumlords by night. Back to the moment a 14-year-old girl watched her mother collapse in a hallway, crushed under the weight of a legal threat that bore one name at the bottom: Roland Urban Holdings. 15 years earlier. The fluorescent lights in apartment 4C never worked properly, but Susan Bennett didn't complain about things she could fix with a lamp from Goodwill and determination. What she complained about, what she fought about, was the black mold creeping through Mrs. Rodriguez's bathroom wall, the broken heating system that left the elderly Mr. Parks shivering through January, and the landlord who cashed checks while ignoring every certified letter. "Mama, I have a geometry test tomorrow." 14-year-old Brittany sat cross-legged in the corner of their cramped living room, textbook balanced on her knees while 15 neighbors crowded around their donated coffee table. "I know, baby. Just one more hour." Susan squeezed her daughter's shoulder before turning back to the group, her fifth-grade teacher voice cutting through the anxious chatter. "We have rights. The housing code is clear. If we document everything and stand together, they have to respond." Brittany watched her mother transform in those moments, watched exhaustion lift from Susan's shoulders as she explained predatory lease clauses in language people could understand, translated legal threats into plain truth, reminded frightened families that their dignity wasn't negotiable. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday, thick, expensive, the kind of paper that announced its importance before you even broke the seal. Roland Urban Holdings, LLC, Legal Department. Susan's hands shook as she read. Not from fear, Brittany would realize years later, but from rage so pure it couldn't find words. The letter was surgical in its cruelty. Cease all organizing activities. Withdraw all housing complaints. Vacate the premises within 60 days or face legal action for lease violations, defamation, and court costs exceeding $47,000. "They can't do this," Mrs. Rodriguez whispered. But they could, and they did. The hallway outside apartment 4C smelled like someone's dinner, garlic and hope mixing with old carpet and defeat. Susan had been preparing for a press conference, her statement printed and highlighted, her best blazer laid out on the bed. She was going to stand on those courthouse steps and name every violation, every ignored repair request, every family the Roland developers had displaced to make room for luxury urban renewal. She never made it to those steps. Brittany found her mother collapsed against the faded wallpaper. Legal papers scattered around her like fallen leaves. The aneurysm was sudden. The death certificate said natural causes. But Brittany knew that stress could kill as surely as any weapon, and that the Roland name had pulled the trigger. The local news covered Susan's death for exactly one news cycle. "Emotional activist dies following housing dispute," the headline read, as if passion were a character flaw, as if loving your neighbors loudly was something shameful. The Roland PR team issued a statement expressing sympathy for all parties, while emphasizing that progress sometimes creates difficult transitions. The eviction went through anyway. Brittany carried boxes past the new development banner, Roland Tower, luxury living, elevated, and felt something crystallize inside her chest. Not just grief, not just rage, purpose. At Susan's grave, Brittany made a promise into the Oakland dirt. "They speak a language you never learned, Mama. Money, law, power. But I'm going to learn it. I'm going to learn it so well they'll never see me coming." What followed was a decade of calculated transformation. Scholarships earned through perfect grades and practiced humility, coding boot camps funded by 3 part-time jobs, nights studying corporate structure and investment law while her roommates slept. She learned to code not because she loved it, but because tech was the new oil and she needed to speak its language fluently. The fintech startup was her first move, a small company building payment solutions for underserved communities. Brittany joined as a junior designer, became indispensable, and watched carefully when a Roland-aligned venture fund acquired them. Suddenly she had access. Internal Slack channels, investor reports, the casual conversations where empires revealed their soft underbelly. By 26, Brittany had built something Susan never could have imagined, an anonymous impact fund that bought predatory landlords' debt and forgave it. Buildings that had displaced families like hers were quietly purchased through shell companies and converted to affordable housing. Every dollar she made went back into the war her mother had started, but it wasn't enough. Because the Roland name still glittered on towers across San Francisco, still represented ethical wealth in TED Talks and Forbes profiles, still crushed families while accepting humanitarian awards. Present day, Susan's grave. Morning fog rolling through the cemetery. Brittany placed fresh flowers on the headstone, daisies, her mother's favorite, and checked her phone. One new notification. Her heart stopped. Interview confirmed. Roland Financial Technologies, UX designer position, hiring manager, Benjamin Roland location, Roland Tower, 47th floor date, Monday, 9 a.m. She stared at the name until it blurred. Benjamin Roland, the Golden Son. The conscious heir who spoke at charity galas about closing the wealth gap while living in a penthouse his father had built on displaced families' graves. The man who had no idea his company once sent a letter that killed a fifth-grade teacher in apartment 4C. "I'm going inside, Mama," Brittany whispered to the headstone, "right into the heart of it. And I'm going to give him a choice you never got, the choice to do the right thing even when it costs him everything." The morning wind carried her words across the cemetery, past other graves holding other mothers, other dreams deferred by people who believed their last names made them untouchable. Brittany Bennett stood, brushed the grass from her jeans, and walked toward her car. In 3 days, she would meet Benjamin Roland for the first time. In 6 months, she would agree to marry him. And at a luxury dinner high above the city, with crystal glasses and cruel laughter, and his grandmother's diamond on her finger, she would finally make him choose what kind of man he really was. But first, she had an interview to pretend to be nervous about. 6 weeks after the interview, Benjamin Roland's face smiled from every screen in the Bay Area that month. TechCrunch, Forbes, a glossy wired profile titled "The Prince of Ethical Tech." In every photo, he wore the same expression: thoughtful, humble, burdened by the responsibility of vast inherited wealth. Brittany watched one of the videos from her carefully curated studio apartment. On screen, Benjamin toured a community center his foundation had funded, while a smooth voiceover praised him. "Benjamin Roland isn't your typical trust fund heir. He's building bridges between Silicon Valley and the communities it's displaced." Brittany's jaw tightened. The community center in that footage? Built on land where the Martinez family had run a corner store for 30 years before a Roland subsidiary bought the block and tripled the rent overnight. "Brittany, hey, wait up!" She'd been walking toward her desk at Roland Financial Technologies when Benjamin's voice cut through the open plan office. She turned, letting her laptop bag slip slightly. Clumsy, uncertain, the performance never stopping. "Mr. Roland, Benjamin, please." That billion-dollar smile. "I wanted to check on your first month. The team says your wireframes for the community investment portal are exceptional." "Oh, thank you. I'm just trying to keep up." She tucked hair behind her ear, a gesture she'd practiced to appear nervous. "Everyone here is so accomplished." "That's exactly why I wanted to mentor you." He leaned against her desk, casual authority radiating from every angle. "People like you, people with raw talent but no connections. You just need someone to open doors. I see something special in you." "People like you." The phrase hung in the air between them, invisible to him, blinding to her. People like her mother. People whose specialness only mattered when framed by his recognition. "I don't know what to say," Brittany murmured, watching him catalog her gratitude like a collector, admiring a rare find. "Say you'll join me Friday. There's a rooftop launch party for a portfolio company. Great networking opportunity." He was already typing her name into his phone. "I'll introduce you around. It's important that talented people get access to rooms they've earned. Earned. As if he hadn't inherited every room he'd ever entered. Friday night, Horizon Sky Bar. The venue perched 60 stories above the city, all geometric lighting and architectural glass. Benjamin moved through the crowd like a sun drawing orbits. Venture capitalists, startup founders, tech journalists, all of them rotating around his gravitational wealth. Brittany sipped sparkling water and played her part. Wide-eyed, slightly overwhelmed, grateful for every introduction. But while her face performed innocence, her mind cataloged everything. The racist joke from a board member about cultural fit that made Benjamin laugh uncomfortably but say nothing. The casual mention of displacing legacy tenants from the mission to make room for modern urban living. The way Benjamin's eyes glazed when an older founder discussed actual technical challenges, perking up only when discussing valuation and exits. She filed each moment away like evidence. Small moral tests he didn't even recognize as tests. You seem quiet. Benjamin appeared at her elbow with fresh drinks. Overwhelmed? A little, she admitted. It's just all of this. She gestured at the skyline, at the casual wealth surrounding them. Sometimes I can't believe this is real. You belong here, Brittany. His hand found her shoulder, warm and proprietary. You just needed someone to see it. Late that night, alone in her studio apartment, Brittany dropped the performance like a heavy coat. She opened her laptop, not the battered MacBook she carried to work, but the encrypted one she kept hidden, and logged into a secure portal. Numbers materialized on the screen. Investment portfolios, shell companies, ownership stakes carefully distributed to avoid detection. Her real net worth stared back at her. 14.7 million. Most of it already pledged to the Impact Fund. Some held in strategic minority stakes in businesses throughout the city, including a controlling interest in Horizon Sky Bar, the very rooftop where Benjamin had just played generous mentor, never suspecting that his newest protege actually owned the floor beneath his expensive shoes. Brittany pulled Susan's photo from her wallet, the edges soft from 15 years of handling. He failed another test tonight, Mama, she whispered, laughed at cruelty, talked about displacement like it's progress, sees me as a project, not a person. Her phone buzzed. Benjamin Rowland. Had a great time tonight. You're special, Brittany. Can't wait to show you more of this world. Weekend in Napa? My family has an estate. Would love for you to see it. Brittany stared at the message, her pulse quickening, not from attraction, but from recognition. We're moving to the next phase. She typed back. I'd love to. Thank you for believing in me. Then she opened a new document and titled it Napa Observations, Rowland Family Dynamics. The Rowland estate sprawled across 200 acres of Napa Valley like a feudal kingdom disguised as a winery. Ancient oak trees lined the entrance, their branches forming a cathedral ceiling over the private road. The main house, a restored Spanish colonial with terracotta tiles and hand-carved wooden doors, rose from manicured gardens like something out of a romance novel. Brittany stepped out of Benjamin's Tesla and let herself breathe in the performance. Wonder, nervousness, gratitude for being invited into such beauty. But her eyes tracked different details. The workers' housing tucked discreetly on a distant hillside. Small utilitarian structures barely visible from the main estate. The security cameras positioned at every vineyard entrance. The way the landscaping deliberately obscured the labor that made this paradise possible. What do you think? Benjamin's arm slid around her waist, proprietary but gentle. I've never seen anything like this. Not a lie. She'd studied the property records, knew the Rowlands had acquired this land in the 1980s when agricultural zoning changes displaced smaller family farms, but she'd never stood in the center of inherited privilege and felt it press against her skin. That evening, something shifted. Benjamin moved through the estate kitchen greeting staff by name, not the performative way executives do in front of cameras, but with genuine warmth. He asked Maria about her daughter's quinceañera, listened to Javier's concern about his father's medical bills, and without hesitation, made a call to connect him with a clinic coordinator. Mr. Rowland, you don't have to, Javier started. Benjamin, and yes, I do. His voice carried quiet conviction. Your family matters. Brittany watched from the doorway, her carefully constructed categories beginning to blur. Later, during a walk through the vineyards, a migrant worker approached hesitantly. His son needed emergency dental work, $800 they didn't have. Benjamin didn't lecture about budgeting or self-reliance. He simply pulled out his phone and transferred the money directly. "Pay it forward when you can," he said softly. "That's all I ask." Brittany felt something dangerous stir in her chest, doubt. Not in her mission, but in her certainty that Benjamin was irredeemable. What if he's different than his family? What if there's real goodness trapped inside inherited sin? That night on the terrace. "Sometimes I feel like I'm suffocating." Benjamin's confession came with wine and starlight, his carefully maintained composure finally cracking. "My family built this empire and everyone expects me to just accept it, defend it. But I see the cost. Brittany, I'm not blind." "Then why stay?" She kept her voice gentle, testing. "Because I can do more good from inside than outside. We fund schools, health clinics, affordable housing initiatives. Yes, we've made mistakes." "Mistakes?" The word escaped before she could stop it. "My grandfather's generation was ruthless, but I'm trying to transform what I inherited into something better. We make more good than harm. I truly believe that." Brittany looked at him, really looked, and saw the sincerity etched into every line of his face. He believed his own narrative. That was the tragedy and the danger. "Tell me about your mother," he urged, changing the subject. She shared a carefully edited version. Susan the teacher, Susan the fighter, Susan who believed dignity mattered more than comfort. She left out the Roland letterhead that killed her. Benjamin listened like it mattered. And maybe in that moment, it did. The proposal happened 48 hours later. Sunset painted the terrace in gold and amber. Drones materialized above the vineyard, their lights spelling out two words: "Marry me." Benjamin knelt with his grandmother's ring, a flawless diamond that probably cost more than Susan's lifetime salary, and promised, "You'll never have to worry again. I'll take care of everything." "I'll take care of everything." The same words every benevolent conqueror has spoken since the beginning of time. "Yes," Brittany whispered, sliding the ring onto her finger, while mentally cataloging the shell companies that own the land beneath their feet. Late that night, alone in the guest suite, Brittany pulled out her journal and wrote in precise handwriting, "If Benjamin publicly defends Susan's name when it costs him his family's approval, when it threatens his inheritance and identity, if he chooses justice over comfort, I will tell him everything. Show him my real life. Build something true together. If he fails, if he chooses them over truth, I will use this engagement to dismantle everything the Roland name has built on other people's graves." She closed the journal as her phone buzzed. "Benjamin, can't wait for you to meet my family properly at the rehearsal dinner next month. They're intense, but they'll love you once they know you like I do." Brittany stared at the message, her stomach tightening. The rehearsal dinner, where families reveal who they really are. Where Benjamin would face the ultimate choice between the woman he claimed to love and the empire that defined him. She looked down at the diamond on her finger, beautiful, cold, and carved from the earth by hands that were never given a choice. "The real test starts now, Mama," she whispered to Susan's photo. "Let's see what kind of man he really is." 3 weeks before the rehearsal dinner, in the Roland family's Pacific Heights mansion, 3 people sat around a marble table reviewing a leather-bound dossier like judges deliberating a verdict. Brittany Bennett, 29, San Jose State graduate. Margaret Roland, Benjamin's mother, flipped through pages with manicured fingers, her expression sharpening with each line. Mid-level UX designer salary, yet she was photographed at Saison wearing a dress that retails for $8,000. "Maybe Benjamin bought it for her," offered Christina, Benjamin's younger sister, though her tone suggested she didn't believe it. "Benjamin's been careful about that. No joint accounts, no large gifts yet." Gerald Rowland, the patriarch, tapped a highlighted section. The investigator found inconsistencies. Her bank statements don't match her lifestyle. There are gaps, periods where her financial activity disappears entirely. Margaret's lips thinned. She's either being sponsored by someone or she's hiding assets. Either way, our son is walking into something he doesn't understand. Should we tell him? Christina asked. Not yet. Margaret closed the folder with finality. Let's meet her first. See what she's really after. Sunday brunch. The Rowland family estate in Napa. Brittany sat across from Margaret, feeling the weight of inspection in every glance. The table overflowed with artisan breads, organic fruits, imported cheeses, the kind of casual abundance that announced itself through understatement. So, Brittany, tell us about your background. Margaret's smile was warm as a blade in sunlight. Benjamin mentioned your mother was involved in community organizing. She was a teacher. She fought for her students and neighbors. How passionate. Margaret's tone made passion sound like a character defect, though sometimes activists can be quite emotional. They block progress with sentiment instead of understanding the bigger economic picture. Brittany's fingers tightened around her mimosa glass. She looked at Benjamin, waiting. He shifted uncomfortably, opened his mouth, closed it, finally managed. Mom, I don't think... Oh, I'm not criticizing your mother, dear. Margaret patted Brittany's hand with practiced condescension. I'm sure she meant well. I'm just saying that for donor events and board meetings, you might want to refine the story, make it more palatable. Silence stretched like a wire about to snap. Benjamin squeezed Brittany's hand under the table, a private gesture of support that meant nothing because it was private. Of course, Brittany heard herself say, voice steady as stone. I understand. But inside she was cataloging, recording, raising the bar on what Benjamin would need to do to pass her test. That same afternoon, Brittany sat in a quiet office across from three allies. Her attorney, a journalist who'd investigated housing corruption for a decade, and the woman who ran the Impact Housing Alliance. Everything's in place, her attorney said simply. 30 years of evidence, every eviction, every displaced family, the letter that killed Susan, all scheduled to go public the morning after the dinner. The journalist nodded. 2 former Rowland executives on record. 5 major outlets ready. It's all automated now. No stopping it once the timer runs out. Brittany's hands trembled slightly. 15 years of grief, about to become undeniable truth. And the restaurant? She asked quietly. Eclipse is ready, the housing director said. Every word spoken at that dinner will be captured. They'll condemn themselves with their own voices. Brittany stared at the folders on the table. Years of pain, about to flood into the light. The timer's already running, her attorney reminded her gently. Tomorrow night, he either defends your mother when it matters, or the world learns exactly who the Rowlands really are. I know, Brittany whispered, touching Susan's photo in her pocket. He gets one final test. After that, the truth tells itself. Wednesday night, Benjamin and Brittany's apartment. I don't understand why you're so fixated on these old projects. Benjamin's frustration leaked through his careful composure. Every big family has complicated history. We're trying to do better now. Your mother called my mother emotional at brunch. You said nothing. I was trying to keep the peace. Peace for who, Benjamin? Brittany's voice cut clean. You lecture about transformation and justice, but when it costs you comfort, you go silent. That's not fair. One day soon, you're going to have to choose. She held his gaze. Not in private, where choosing me is easy. In public, where it costs you something real. You'll have to decide what kind of man you are when the room is watching. He reached for her hand. She let him take it, but something had shifted. A distance measured in moral clarity rather than physical space. Friday afternoon, Eclipse Restaurant, 52nd floor. Brittany stood by floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay, watching the setup crew polish crystal and arrange white orchids. A technician adjusted a decorative speaker panel, giving her a discreet thumbs up. The recording system was active. In 48 hours, Benjamin's family would gather in this room. They would toast. They would perform their carefully curated version of benevolent wealth, and they would reveal exactly who they were when they thought no one who mattered was listening. Brittany pulled out her phone and opened the photo of Susan. Creased, faded, carried through 15 years of transformation. This room will remember every word, Mama, she whispered, and so will the world. The rehearsal dinner, Eclipse Restaurant. 52nd floor. Brittany stepped out of the elevator into a room designed to make mortals feel small. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the San Francisco Bay like a painting, the Golden Gate Bridge glowing orange against twilight, the city lights beginning their evening performance below. Crystal chandeliers caught the last rays of sunset and scattered them across tables set with Roland family china, each plate bearing the family crest in gold leaf. A string quartet played softly in the corner. Waiters in white gloves moved like synchronized dancers. The air smelled of money, expensive perfume, aged wine, and the particular scent of people who'd never questioned whether they belonged in rooms like this. Brittany wore a midnight blue gown she'd purchased through a designer investment. Elegant, understated, perfect. Staff members greeted her with subtle deference Benjamin didn't notice. A maitre d's respectful nod, a sommelier's knowing smile. They recognized the woman who'd signed their paychecks, even if her fiancé had no idea. Benjamin squeezed her hand. "You look incredible. They're going to love you." She smiled and said nothing. The first hour passed in polite performance, introductions to distant cousins and family friends, small talk about wedding venues and honeymoon destinations. Champagne flowed. Laughter echoed off marble and glass. Then the toast began. Christina, Benjamin's sister, stood first, her smile sharp as the crystal in her hand. "To Brittany, who's come so far from, well, from nothing really. We're just amazed you're not more overwhelmed by all this." She gestured at the room with practiced casualness. "I mean, it must be like landing on another planet for someone from your background." Polite laughter rippled through the crowd, the kind that sounds like support but cuts like criticism. Brittany looked at Benjamin. He shifted uncomfortably but smiled, playing along. Strike one. Margaret Rowland took the microphone next, her presentation already loaded on a massive screen. "I've put together a little slideshow introducing our new family member." Photos appeared. Brittany's graduation, her modest apartment building, images from her mother's community organizing days. But Margaret's narration twisted everything, made Susan's tenant advocacy sound quaint and misguided, made their neighborhood sound dangerous and desperate, made Brittany's education sound like charity rather than achievement. Susan Bennett was quite the passionate activist, Margaret said, her tone making passionate sound like unstable. Always organizing, always protesting. Bless her heart, some people just can't understand how business and progress work. They get emotional instead of practical. The room chuckled knowingly. Brittany's fingers tightened around her champagne flute. She looked at Benjamin. He looked down at his plate. Strike two. Then came the cousin, a Roland hedge fund manager who'd had too much wine. "I remember that whole tenant thing," he announced loudly. "The woman who collapsed during that eviction dispute, right? My dad always said some people just can't handle pressure. They take these things too personally and, well," he shrugged. "Natural selection in real estate, I guess." Laughter, uncomfortable now, but still laughter. "Susan Bennett was an emotional tenant agitator," someone else added, parroting the exact phrase from the news coverage 15 years ago. "Blocked progress for months." The room nodded, murmured agreement, sipped expensive wine while casually destroying the memory of a woman who died fighting them. Brittany turned to Benjamin, her fiancé, her supposed partner, the man who'd promised to stand beside her against everything. His face was pale, uncomfortable, but he stayed seated. He squeezed her hand under the table. That private, meaningless gesture. He leaned close and whispered, "Just let them talk. We'll fix it later, I promise." Later, not now, not when it mattered. Not when the room was watching and his family's approval hung in the balance. Strike three. The experiment was over. Silence fell, not because anyone stopped talking, but because Brittany stopped hearing them. The world narrowed to her own heartbeat, the weight of his grandmother's diamond on her finger, and the sound of Susan's voice from 15 years ago. "Baby, never let anyone make you small to keep them comfortable." She stood. Every eye turned toward her, curious, expectant, some already sensing drama. Benjamin reached for her hand. "Brittany, what?" She pulled away gently, deliberately, And with hands that did not shake, she slid his grandmother's ring off her finger. The diamond caught the chandelier light one final time before she placed it carefully on the white tablecloth, where it sat like an accusation. The string quartet stopped playing. 200 people held their breath. And Brittany Bennett, the woman they'd called overwhelmed, the daughter they'd called emotional, the fighter whose mother died unheard, looked around the room and felt 15 years of silence rise up through her chest like a prayer about to be answered. Brittany's voice cut through the silence like a blade through silk, calm, steady, and impossible to ignore. My mother's name was Susan Bennett. The room froze. Not that tenant agitator, not some emotional woman. Susan Bennett, fifth-grade teacher, community organizer, a woman who believed that families deserve safe housing more than investors deserve maximum returns. Margaret's smile turned brittle. Brittany, dear, this isn't the time. She received a legal threat from Roland Urban Holdings 15 years ago. Brittany's voice never wavered. $47,000 in threatened fees if she didn't stop organizing tenants against predatory lease practices. She was preparing to speak publicly about your family's eviction tactics when she collapsed from a stress-induced aneurysm in the hallway of apartment 4C. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Benjamin stood abruptly. Brittany, what are you? She died 3 days later. The eviction went through anyway. And your family's PR team made sure every news outlet called her emotional instead of effective. This is absurd, Gerald Rowland sputtered. We've never... I have the letter. Brittany's eyes swept the room. I have everything. 30 years of eviction records, shell company structures, internal memos describing tenants as obstacles to value optimization. Every cruel, calculated decision that built the fortune you're all celebrating tonight. Her gaze landed on Benjamin, and for a moment her voice softened with genuine grief. I gave you so many chances, small tests you didn't even recognize. Tonight was the final one. Would you defend my mother's name when your family mocked her? When it cost you their approval? I was going to talk to them privately, Benjamin started. Privately. The word fell like a stone. As if justice can happen in whispers. As if my mother's death was something to be managed with quiet conversations later. She looked back at the crowd, her voice strengthening. Every toast you made tonight was recorded. This building, Eclipse Restaurant, you might be surprised to learn I hold controlling interest in it through a silent partnership. The audio system you're surrounded by? Recording everything for the past 3 hours. Horror dawned on faces around the room. Phones emerged from purses and pockets as guests began frantically Googling, fact-checking, realizing the truth. By tomorrow morning, Brittany continued, 5 major outlets will publish comprehensive investigations into Rowland family business practices. My attorneys have already filed documentation with housing regulators. And every dollar I've earned from Rowland-connected investments, yes, I'm worth far more than any of you imagined, will fund the Susan Bennett Initiative for Housing Justice and Legal Aid. She picked up the ring from the tablecloth, held it up to catch the light one final time. Benjamin, I can't marry a man who won't defend my mother when the room is watching, who chooses comfort over courage, who mistakes private apologies for public integrity. She placed the ring in his palm, closing his fingers around it. The wedding is off. The elevator doors closed on Benjamin's stunned reflection as Brittany descended alone, 52 floors of glass and steel between her and the chaos erupting above. Her phone buzzed continuously, scheduled emails releasing to journalists, document links going live, years of preparation executing automatically. Benjamin caught her in the lobby, no longer the confident heir, but a man watching his world fracture. You used me, he said, anger and heartbreak warring in his voice. This was all a setup, an ambush. I gave you every opportunity to be different than them. Brittany's voice stayed steady even as tears threatened. I fell in love with the man you could have been, but you chose them. Every time it mattered, you chose comfort over truth. So you destroy everything. My reputation, my family, our future. I'm not destroying anything, Benjamin. I'm revealing what was always there. Your empire was built on broken families, on mothers like mine who died fighting for basic dignity. If exposing that truth destroys you, maybe you were never as solid as you believed. She walked away, leaving him standing in the marble lobby while, somewhere above, his family frantically called lawyers and PR teams, trying to contain a truth that was already flooding across every screen in the city. Midnight. In a modest apartment she'd kept secret, Brittany sat with her laptop and pressed send on the final scheduled releases. Breaking news alerts lit up her phone like fireworks. Roland Empire under investigation. Decades of predatory housing practices exposed. Who is Brittany Bennett? The woman who walked away from billions. Sorry, justice for Susan Trends, as viral video shows, billionaire family mocking dead activist. Across the city, in the Rowland family's penthouse, 3 generations gathered in crisis, lawyers spreading documents across tables, PR consultants crafting damage control statements, parents raging while Benjamin sat silent, still holding his grandmother's ring. His mother's voice cut through the chaos. "We'll bury that girl, discredit her, make her regret." "You still don't understand." Benjamin's voice was hollow. "She already won." The chapter ended with a news anchor's face filling screens across California, teasing the morning broadcast. Up next, the dark side of the Rowland Empire and the woman who called off her wedding to expose it. Stay with us. Dawn broke over San Francisco like Judgment Day. Brittany woke in her secret apartment to her phone vibrating continuously, not with threats, but with notifications of truth spreading like wildfire across digital screens. Breaking. Rowland family empire built on displacement and predatory housing. Viral billionaire family mocks dead. Activist at rehearsal dinner. Fiancé exposes everything. The video, 60 seconds of the Rowland family's cruelest moments, edited from the restaurant recording, had been viewed 12 million times by Sunrise. Christina's condescending toast, the cousin's callous dismissal of Susan's death, Margaret's slideshow twisting Susan's legacy into embarrassment, and then Brittany's voice, calm and devastating. "My mother's name was Susan Bennett." By noon, the financial consequences cascaded like dominoes. Rowland Industries' stock plummeted 18% in morning trading. Institutional investors announced immediate reviews of holdings. 3 major banks suspended credit lines pending investigations. The San Francisco Housing Authority opened formal inquiries. The State Attorney General's office issued subpoenas. Federal regulators requested documents dating back 30 years. Elite social institutions move faster than regulators, the circles where reputation mattered more than law. The San Francisco Symphony quietly removed the Rowland name from their donor wall. Stanford announced a comprehensive review of the Rowland Endowed Chair. Country clubs and private schools sent discreet letters about temporarily suspended memberships pending resolution. Charity galas uninvited the family. Political allies went silent. Influencers who'd posed with Benjamin at product launches deleted photos and posted vague statements about aligning with our values. The empire hadn't fallen yet, but its foundations were crumbling, and everyone could hear the cracks. That afternoon, a downtown press conference. Brittany stood before cameras, dressed simply, Susan's photo displayed on a screen behind her. "I'm not here to celebrate revenge," she began, her voice steady. "I'm here to announce the Susan Bennett Initiative for Housing Justice, a foundation funded by redirecting every dollar I earned through Rowland-connected investments into legal aid, housing stability programs, and support for tenants facing predatory practices." Questions erupted. She answered each with precision, refusing to discuss her personal heartbreak, focusing relentlessly on systemic change. "This isn't about one family," she said. "It's about a system that treats housing as commodity and families as obstacles. My mother died fighting that system. I'm continuing her work." A reporter shouted, "Do you regret the engagement?" "I regret that a good man chose comfort over courage when it mattered most, but I don't regret giving him the chance to be better." Across the city, Benjamin's penthouse. Benjamin sat alone, surrounded by screens replaying Brittany's speech, his family's mocking laughter, the moment he'd squeezed her hand and whispered later, instead of defending the woman he'd claimed to love. His phone buzzed. Another title stripped away. Another board requesting his resignation. Another friend going silent, but none of it hurt like the manila envelope his assistant had just delivered, marked urgent historical records. Inside, a copy of the letter Roland Urban Holdings had sent to Susan Bennett 15 years ago. Benjamin's hands shook as he read the legal threats, the intimidation tactics, the cold corporate language designed to crush resistance. At the bottom, his father's signature as VP of Urban Development, and the property address, 2847 Mission Street, apartment 4C. The building where Susan had died, the building his family had torn down to make room for Roland Tower, the very place where he'd first met Brittany, where he'd corrected her pronunciation with amused superiority, where he'd seen a project to save instead of a woman testing his soul. "Oh God," he whispered, the full weight of it crushing down. "She gave me everything, every chance, and I failed every single one." 8 months later, the Susan Bennett Memorial Archive occupied a converted warehouse in the Mission District. Exposed brick walls lined with filing cabinets, digital displays showing testimonies from families displaced by predatory landlords, photographs of tenant organizers who'd fought and lost against corporate power. Susan's photo hung largest of all, watching over the space like a guardian. Brittany arrived early as she always did, reviewing case files for the initiative's latest housing clinic. The work never stopped. 3 buildings secured, 40 families housed, 12 legal victories against landlord retaliation. Small numbers against an ocean of need, but each one a life changed. Each one a testament to Susan's legacy. The door opened. Benjamin Rowland stepped inside, and Brittany barely recognized him. Gone was the tailored suit, the confident stride, the easy smile of inherited power. He wore jeans and a simple jacket, looking diminished, not just physically, but spiritually, like a man who'd been hollowed out and was only beginning to rebuild from the inside. No entourage, no lawyer, no PR handler managing his image. Just a man carrying the weight of his family's sins. They sat across from each other at a scarred wooden table, surrounded by the evidence of what his family had built and destroyed. "Thank you for meeting me," Benjamin said quietly. "I know I don't deserve—" "You don't," Brittany agreed, her voice not cruel but truthful. "So why are you here?" "To apologize, really apologize. Not the way I was raised to, where you say sorry but keep everything the same." He met her eyes and she saw genuine anguish there. "I failed you. I failed your mother. I chose my family's comfort over your dignity, and there's no excuse for that. None." Silence hung between them, heavy with everything unsaid over 8 months of distance. "My father's under indictment," Benjamin continued. "My mother's facing civil suits. The company's being restructured under federal oversight. And I've read everything. Every eviction file, every internal memo treating people like obstacles. I read the letter they sent to your mother." His voice cracked. "I calculated it. Susan died in apartment 4C, which became the foundation for Roland Tower, the building where we met, where I condescended to you, where I thought I was saving you." He laughed bitterly. "God, I built my entire identity on land where your mother's heart gave out because my family threatened her." "Yes," Brittany said simply. "You did." "I'm not here asking for forgiveness," Benjamin said. "I'm here asking what justice looks like, what restitution means. Because I've spent 8 months learning the difference between feeling sorry and making things right." Brittany studied him, this man she'd loved, tested, and walked away from. This heir who'd failed every moral examination she'd given him. "Justice isn't about your feelings, Benjamin. It's about what you're willing to lose." She pulled out a folder, slid it across the table. 3 conditions, non-negotiable. He opened it, reading carefully. 1. Full cooperation with every investigation and prosecutor, even when it implicates your family directly. No privilege, no protection, complete transparency. He nodded. 2. Your entire personal trust and inheritance, approximately $47 million, transferred to a restitution fund under independent oversight. Not a donation you can write off. A surrender. His hands trembled slightly, but he kept reading. 3. 5 years of work in housing clinics and legal aid organizations. Minimum wage. Anonymous. under supervisors who don't care about your last name and won't treat you gently because of who you were. Benjamin looked up. And after 5 years? After 5 years, you'll have earned the right to call yourself something other than a Roland heir who got tested and failed. But there's no guarantee, Benjamin, no promise of us. This isn't about winning me back. It's about who you become when no one's watching and there's nothing left to gain. The silence stretched between them, infinite and heavy. Benjamin stared at the documents. His entire future reduced to 3 conditions that would cost him everything his name had given him. Will you be there? He asked quietly. During those 5 years? I'll be doing the work I've always done. Whether our paths cross depends on where your feet actually take you, not where your words promise to go. He picked up the pen. His hand hovered over the first signature line, the cooperation agreement that would turn him into a witness against his own family. Every childhood memory, every family dinner, every implicit loyalty commanded by blood and money pressed down on that pen. And then he signed. Tell me where to show up on Monday, Benjamin said, his voice steady for the first time, and I'll be there. Brittany allowed herself the smallest nod. Not forgiveness, not trust, but acknowledgement that the real test had finally begun. 5 years later, the Susan Bennett Community Learning Center rose from the exact block where apartment 4C had once stood, where a 5th-grade teacher had collapsed under the weight of legal threats, where a 14-year-old girl had made a promise over her mother's body. Now in its place, 3 stories of light-filled classrooms, a legal aid clinic, a community library named for tenants who'd fought and lost against predatory landlords. The exterior mural stretched 40 feet high, Susan's face watching over the neighborhood she'd died defending, surrounded by portraits of families who'd been displaced but never defeated. The plaza overflowed with people, former tenants, housing advocates, city officials who'd once ignored Susan's calls, now claiming to champion her legacy. News cameras captured it all, while children played on new playground equipment, their laughter echoing off walls built from redirected rolling wealth. Brittany stood backstage, watching through a gap in the curtain, and felt Susan's presence like sunlight. And now, the MC announced, the founder of the Susan Bennett Initiative and the visionary behind this center, Brittany Bennett. Applause thundered as Brittany took the podium. My mother never wanted monuments, she began, her voice carrying across the plaza. She wanted washing machines that worked in heat and winter. She wanted lease agreements in language people could understand. She wanted her students to have safe homes to return to after school. She gestured at the building behind her. This center isn't about remembering Susan. It's about continuing her work. Every legal clinic session, every tenant advocacy training, every family we help stay housed. That's the memorial she would have wanted. Her eyes swept the crowd. Some of you know that this center was funded by money taken from those who once profited from displacement, that justice sometimes means taking from the powerful and returning it to those they harmed. A pause waited with everything unsaid. There are those who laid down their crowns to help rebuild what their crowns once crushed, who chose transformation over inheritance, who learned that redemption isn't a moment. It's years of showing up when no one's watching and there's nothing left to gain. She didn't name Benjamin, didn't need to. This work is bigger than any one person's story. It's bigger than romance or revenge. It's about building a world where no mother dies defending her family's right to a safe home. The applause rose like prayer. An hour later, behind the building, Brittany found Benjamin in the storage area, stacking folding chairs and coiling extension cords, tasks no one would photograph, no media would celebrate. He'd kept his word. 5 years at minimum wage, working intake at housing clinics across the city. She'd heard reports. He showed up early, stayed late, never mentioned his last name, learned to listen before speaking, absorbed criticism without defensiveness. The transformation hadn't been performed for cameras. It had been carved into him through consequence, repetition, and the daily choice to be someone different than he'd been born to be. You didn't have to do this part, Brittany said softly. Benjamin looked up, hand still on a cable. Actually, I did. The work doesn't end with the speeches. 5 years had changed him, not just physically, though he was leaner, more weathered, but fundamentally. The savior complex was gone. The entitlement, the assumption that doors would open because of his name. I never stopped loving who you could be, Brittany admitted, but I had to wait until I saw you become that person without any promise it would lead back to me. Did I? He asked quietly. Become that person? She studied him, this man who'd lost everything and rebuilt slowly, humbly in the margins where real change happened. You're becoming him, every day. Is that enough? Brittany stepped closer. The question isn't whether it's enough for me, Benjamin. It's whether it's enough for you. Whether you can keep choosing justice over comfort even when I'm not watching. Even when it's just you and your choices and no one to impress. I can, he said. I will. And for the first time, she believed him. They walked into the courtyard together, not as rescuer and rescued, not as heir and project, but as two people who'd both been transformed by Susan's legacy. One through loss, one through consequence. Children played under Susan's mural. Families gathered in spaces built from accountability. The city hummed around them, still broken in 1,000 ways, still demanding the work continue. Benjamin reached for Brittany's hand, not with ownership, but with invitation. She took it. My beautiful family, dignity is worth more than any diamond. Walking away from a wedding can be walking toward the life God meant you to have. May you never sell your mother's memory for comfort. May you demand that love bend toward justice, not just feeling. And may you remember, some journeys require us to lose everything before we find what truly matters. If this story touched your heart, write justice for Susan. Let it be a prayer for every mother, every fighter, every soul who refused to be silent. And if you believe stories like this matter, stories that choose truth over comfort, then stand with me. Subscribe to this channel so we can continue Susan's fight together. Hit that like button as a witness that you were here, that you heard her name, that you refuse to let mothers like her be forgotten. Share this story with someone who needs to remember their worth cannot be bought. Turn on notifications so you never miss when we gather again. Your support keeps these stories alive and keeps truth louder than money. Until we meet again in the next story, may peace follow you home. May your daughters know their value, and may justice always find its voice. I am here because you are here. Thank you, my beloved community.